that kind of far-fetched explanation from Ezekiel still would be in favor or advocating child marriage, according to your definition. Do you think that you don't develop your breast as a girl until you're 18 years old? Like, that's ridiculous. So even according to the Bible argument that you painstakingly laid out for us, that passage would be in favor or endorsing child marriage according to your definition, because you've arbitrarily set it so high at 18. Like, why? Like, you're so concerned about moral arguments. Why is 18 the line? Like, what is so special about 18 that no one in history has ever, prior to industrialization, prior to these mandatory age limits, prior to this...
Yeah, I got a comment on that. That's a fantastic point that he asked him. It's like, yeah, well, why is it this 18, right? You're basing it off of, morality. Well, wait, why is it 18? Why is 18 the cutoff point? Why is, say for an example, why is 19 not the cutoff? Why is 21 not the cutoff? Why is 16 not the cutoff? Why is it this arbitrary number, 18? May I also mention 18 is the number 666. Very simple. 6 plus 6 equals 12. 12 plus 6 equals 18. Right, so 666. Just to put that little side note out there. But that's a great question. It's like, well, why is it 18, right? Why is it this arbitrary number? Like, what is the difference between a 17-year-old and an 18-year-old? And the answer is, well, there is no difference. So wait, so why is the 17-year-old not an adult, but the 18-year-old is an adult? I mean, you ask him and he doesn't know. He's like, well, it's the law. Well, what is the law? The law is just, a bunch of rich people come together, write scribbles on pieces of paper, and they call that the law. That's what it is. So the law is something arbitrary that a group of, rich, powerful individuals just made up and forced upon the population. So basically what he's saying is, well, 18 is the age of consent and age of adulthood. Why is that way? Well, because the government said so. It's like, well, wait a second. Well, what if the government came out tomorrow and said that we decide the age of consent is 25 and the age of, being an adult is 25? So how do you respond to that then? They'll be like, oh, well, that's the law. So yeah, a 24-year-old, well, they're kids, right? They're children now because the U.S. government said that the age of adulthood is 25. And the only argument they have is, oh, well, that's the law. In other words, somebody made this up and told me that's what it is. So I repeat them because, I am a law-abiding citizen, right? I'm a freedom-loving American. Wait a second, how the hell could you be a freedom-loving American if you literally just believe every edict that comes down from the quote-unquote authority? Like, whatever the government decides, you guys go along with and don't even question it. It's ridiculous. But again, that's a great question. It's like, why is it this 18? Like, what is so special about this arbitrary number? Why is 16 not considered to be adulthood? Why is 21 not considered to be the cutoff point? Why is it this arbitrary, made-up number? You ask him, and he doesn't know. It's not only this dude, right? If you went up to, 1,000 people on the street and asked them the same question, asked them, well, when do you become adult? I guarantee you, 999 out of 1,000 would say, oh, well, it's 18, right? It's 18. You ask them, well, why is that exactly? You might have to give them a second to think because, they never actually thought about that before. They just said, oh, well, that's just what it is. Well, how do you know that's what it is? Oh, well, that's the law. Well, what is the law? Are you even intelligent enough to know what the law actually is? So it pisses you off to think about how retarded some people are. Like, I can say from my own personal experience, man, I'm 20 now, but there's no difference between myself today and who I was 4 years ago when I was 16. There's literally no difference. I've just been alive, for a few hundred more days, than what I was, back then. Other than that, there's no difference. I still have the same, mindset, the same, sexual attractions that I had back then. The same, beliefs that I had. So if I could have demonstrated when I was 16, that I'm capable of, being an adult, why should I have not been allowed to do that back then? Just because I'm under an arbitrary number. I mean, that seems like oppression right there. And you know what the funny thing is? Here it is. I have heard stories about, say, for example, if an older person, say, in their 60s goes to get a job, the job might reject them because, oh, well, we'll reject you because, well, you're 60. But then they'll sue him. The guy will sue him because, well, wait a second, that's age what is it called? Discrimination, right? That's age discrimination, and they can sue them for that. So I was like, wait a second, that's hypocritical. So if a 16-year-old was to go get a job, and they say, oh, well, sorry, you're not 18, so we can't, hire you to work here. She somehow can't claim it that's, age discrimination, but somehow the 60-year-old can do it. I mean, that seems like pure hypocrisy. But again, nobody will acknowledge it because, oh, well, she's, 16, if she was 18 and they told her she couldn't work there because she was under, 30 or whatever, then, oh, yeah, well, I'll be up in arms about that. But because she's 16, it's like, oh, no, she's just an innocent child. It's like that is absolutely retarded. But this is how these dumbasses think out here, man. Like, say, for an example, bear with me a second. One thing I'd like to comment on is nobody ever stops to think about the fact that, they'll let you drive around, a few thousand-pound machine, right, a car, when you're 16. They'll let you drive it, 60, 70, 80 miles an hour on the highway, putting everyone else's life at risk. And your own life, may I also add. But somehow, right, at 16, you are mature enough and capable of driving a few thousand-pound piece of metal at, 70, 80 miles an hour, putting your life and everyone else's life at risk of death or serious injury. But somehow that same person is somehow not responsible enough to smoke cigarettes or purchase a lottery ticket. I mean, what is the logic behind that? You ask people, and they don't know. They just say, oh, well, that's the law. That's the law. It's like, are you that much of a dumbass so the 16-year-old can risk their life driving down to the nearest gas station? Right? Not only risk their own life, but everybody else who happens to be in the area of them driving. But somehow, that same person who is responsible and mature enough to operate this piece of machinery, they somehow are not responsible enough to smoke cigarettes or play a lottery game. You ask people, well, what is the logic behind that? And they say, oh, it's just the law. It's like, well, that's not a fair argument. That would be like, say, for an example, in the 1800s in the United States, slavery was legal, right? Slavery was acceptable. So go up to somebody and ask them, well, would you accept that if the law said that slavery is moral? They'd be like, oh, of course not, of course not. Slavery is immoral. It's like, but wait a second. So how is it then that you'll use something, being legal or illegal to justify if it's moral or immoral, but yet you contradict yourself because I just asked about if the law states that slavery is moral, you'll claim that it's immoral. So you're claiming that the law is incorrect and is immoral. But somehow, when I bring up the statement about how the U.S. government will allow a 16-year-old to drive a vehicle, but yet that same 16-year-old is not able to purchase, cigarettes, and I say that's the unjust law, then you'll be like, oh, well, no, the law was always moral, right? The law is always how we determine what's moral and immoral. So, I mean, that's a clear contradiction. I also would like to point out the fact that, these people believe that morality can just change. One day something's okay, but the next day it's wrong. Like, say, for an example, back in 2019, you could purchase, tobacco products when you're 18. But then Trump decided to change that, right, in 2020, right? He changed it, so now you had to be 21 to purchase tobacco products. So the day before that, it was okay to purchase it 3 years before, but as soon as the clock hit midnight, now it's immoral and you have to be 3 years older. And these dumbasses actually believe that that's how we determine what is moral and immoral. I mean, how the hell can it be okay for an 18-year-old to purchase tobacco today, but tomorrow somehow it's now immoral for that person to do the exact same thing? And nobody ever thinks about that. I also would like to point out that if you go over to the UK, over there you can purchase tobacco and cigarettes at 16. Hell, I know certain friends who smoke and actually drink alcohol too, at like 16, 17. And they turned out to be fine. So why was that immoral for them exactly? Just because they're under an arbitrary number? I mean, that just seems absolutely preposterous. And again, going back to my initial argument, it just seems absolutely hypocritical and laughable how we could say that, yeah, this person, right, at 16, they are allowed to drive a few thousand-pound car, that can literally kill multiple people in a matter of seconds. That's perfectly fine for them to do. But that same person, we have to restrict them from buying tobacco products or buying lottery cards. I mean, if that is not pure self-contradictory, I don't know what the hell it is. I mean, that is just unbelievable. And these dumbasses out here actually believe that. And that's the mind-blowing part. You ask them, well, why do you believe that? They don't know. Let me give you an example. I was at Walgreens this one time, and I actually knew this guy who worked at the counter, because I usually go in there to buy products or whatever I need. And this one time, there was a woman in there. You could see how elderly she was. Right? It took her 10 minutes to put her purse down and get her money out to pay for the cigarette she was trying to buy. And this dude, we'll call him Ron, right? We'll call him Ron. And Ron told her that, oh, well, where's your ID at? And she didn't have it on her, so she couldn't get the tobacco products. Even though the sign on the door says we card anyone who looks under 40. It's like, shit, you could see this person's an elderly person, probably in their 70s or 80s. So I call him out on it. I say, well, it's like, damn, man, that don't make sense. I mean, you see she's clearly over 40. The sign says that you card people that look under 40, but she's clearly, on her way out. Inside joke. So he had to think for a second what to say, because he never thought, anybody would question, his actions. And then he said something along the lines of, well, she could be buying it for somebody else, right? She could be buying it for somebody else. Then I think it's like, well, wait a second. So since she can't show you her card, that leads you to the conclusion that she might be buying it for somebody else. But somehow, if she did show you her card, that somehow means she wasn't buying it for somebody else. I mean, that's the logic that he was trying to use there. It's like, wait a second, how the hell does that make sense? What logic does that make? So if she shows you her card, that proves she's buying it for herself. But if she doesn't show you it, that proves she might be buying it for another person. It's like, what the hell? What type of logic is that? Another thing I'd like to mention, a few weeks ago, actually, yeah, not too long ago, I was, walking, and, somebody stopped me and asked me, and this is back when I was like 19, right? Somebody stopped me and asked, hey man, I lost my, my wallet, I don't got it on me, something along those lines. And they asked me, can you go into the store and purchase me some alcohol products? I'll give you the money for it, I just don't have an ID on me. And I had to tell him, hey man, I'm only, like 19, I would do it for you, but unfortunately I can't buy it. So they looked at me and saw, oh yeah, well that guy, obviously is, 21, right? That guy's obviously fully grown. So it shows you that, looks can be deceiving. But, it begs the question of, well, why would it be immoral for, a 20-year-old or 18-year-old to drink alcohol? I mean, why is that immoral? And that's an entirely different video there. Hell, why is it immoral for a 16-year-old to drink alcohol? As I said earlier, I got friends who done it. I've done it, young. I was very responsible with it. And then you have people who are in their 20s who are very irresponsible with it. So it's like, you can't just restrict every young person from these activities just because, oh, well, they're all irresponsible. It's like, well, that's not true. Just like how every 25-year-old's not irresponsible with alcohol. Some of them might be, but that doesn't mean that every single one is. So to restrict, a certain age group from something just because, a few of them do something, that doesn't seem fair. That would be like it's saying, say, for example, people who are in like their, 60s, 70s, We should restrict all of them from driving vehicles because due to health issues such as, maybe having vision problems or, other health problems, it's more typical that they might get into an accident, more frequently than a younger driver would. So that means we have to ban everybody who's over the age of 65 from driving a vehicle because it's more common for them to get into an accident than somebody who's, younger than them. That's like the same line of logic. It's like, no, that doesn't justify banning everybody who's, over the age of 65 from driving a car just because that age group is more likely to get into some type of accident due to health issues. But again, that's the same line of logic that they're using. It's like, oh, well, some people who are 16, might be irresponsible with tobacco products. So that means we got to restrict every single person from, who's 16 from, buying these products. Again, it's pure hypocrisy, but nobody ever addresses it. Nobody will ever question it. I'll let them continue.
Idea that we have to go through 12 grades before we're fully mature, before we're fully adults. Like, where does that come from? You haven't provided an explanation for that. Why there's this radical shift. My explanation is very clear. There's industrialization, there's feminism, and that is what has, over the past 300 years, created these taboos of child marriage that you can't find anyone else express. Like, isn't this bizarre to you? Like, isn't this such a big red flag that what you're describing as this kind of objective moral principle is not actually very objective or universal? Like, especially like for Christians to say this, like, because your Bible seems to endorse it, your prophets in the Old Testament seem to endorse it. Jesus has nothing to say to condemn it. Canon law has a minimum age of marriage of 12. So are you going to condemn canon law? Are you going to condemn the church fathers? Are you going to condemn all of those? Okay, yeah, you're shaking your head, yeah. So
you saw that? I gotta go back. You saw that the dude asked him, so are you gonna, condemn the writers of the Bible? Gonna condemn them? And the dumbass literally shook his head. Yes. Let me play that again.
Canon law has a minimum age of marriage of 12. So are you going to condemn canon law? Are you going to condemn the church fathers? Are you going to condemn all of those? Okay, yeah, you're shaking your head.
Oh my goodness. This is just unbelievable. Unbelievable, man. So once again, the Muslims making phenomenal points. I mean, this Christian's getting his ass daggered, left and right here, man. He's just brought up so many good points. The Muslim. I mean, this is absolutely a spiritual knockout here. I mean, this is painful to watch. This cremation of this Christian here, man. And it's a damn shame. And this dude's on his channel now, doing videos about how he schooled the Muslim, even though he didn't really address any information that they brought up in the debate. It's just, I can't even believe this nonsense. I can't even believe that this dude will come with some of the arguments that he came with. But yet not be prepared to deal with the response that, he would get and the challenges that would be provided to him. Like, again, the Muslim asked him a minute ago about, well, why is it 18, right? Like, you need to provide evidence for why this is like the end-all be-all. Why is 16 not the end-all be-all? Why is 20 not the end-all be-all? Why is it this arbitrary number? Well, may I also point out the fact of, well, wait a second. You consider teens to be kids, right? Well, what is a teen? You look up the word teen. It says, well, we call people who are, in their teens, we call them teens because it has the word teen in the number of their age. So then you ask them, well, teens are not adults, right? He's like, oh, yeah, well, teens are not adults. So wait a second. So why are 18 and 19-year-olds, they're considered to be adults, but they have the word teen in their age? And the entire reason, if you look it up, for why we call teens teens is because they have the word teen and the number of their age. So by a logical deduction, if there were such a thing as a teenager, well, why would an 18-year-old and a 19-year-old, why would they be considered to be an adult if they have the word teen and the number of their age? And that's the entire reason why we call teens teens. So, I mean, that one question there, he doesn't know. He can't respond to that. He probably didn't even know why teens are called teens.